square roots. If I highlight something, I want you to make sure you write it in your math notebook, okay? So I'm going to start with 8.1, square roots. I want you to write that in your notes. And if you need to hit pause during the video, hit pause so you can keep up. Now remember from last week we said this symbol right here, I want you to draw that in your notes. It's like a division sign with a check mark on it. That is called a square root sign. I want you to write that next to that symbol. Square root sign. I also want you to write the other word for that symbol. It's called a radical. So there's two names for that symbol. It's a square root symbol. It's also a radical symbol. So make sure both of those are in your notes. Second thing you need in your notes is this entire page. You should have a list of all your perfect squares from 1 to 20. That's the list you have to memorize in 60 seconds. So if you don't have those written in your notes, you need to pause the video and write those in. Now, why are those numbers on that perfect square list? Because they are perfect squares, meaning 3 times 3 is 9. In other words, another way to write that, 3 squared, which means 3 times 3 is 9. That's why 9 is on your list. Okay? Another one, I could do 4 times 4, which can be rewritten as 4 squared, which means 4 times 4. And my answer is 16. 16 is on our list. That means if I did 4 squares this way and 4 squares this way and filled them in, I would get a perfect square. 16 individual squares, so that's why it's a perfect square. So we're going to try to solve these. The first one is, what's the answer to 5 squared? Now remember, that means 5 times 5. Your answer, 25. Number 2, 9 squared. Remember, that means 9 times 9. What is your answer? And then I'm going to have you solve the other 3 questions. $17 squared means 17 times 17, 289. 19 squared means 19 times 19, answer, 361. And 8 squared means 8 times 8, the answer, 64. On your homework today, all you need to write is the answer. You do not have to show your work. In your notes, I want you to write this statement. Inverse, meaning the opposite. The opposite of squaring a number is finding its square root. And what that means is here, 3 squared, that's 9. The opposite would be the square root of 9, which means what number times itself would equal 9? Your answer, is 3. Another example. What would the square root of 25 be? To solve this, I have to think to myself, what number times itself equals 25? 5. Now notice, I don't write 5 squared. I don't write 5 times 5. You get to write the 5, and that's it. Just like over here, I didn't write 3 squared. I didn't write 3 times 3. I just wrote one single number, and that's the 3. Find the square root. So I need to find the square root of 16. So I'm trying to ask myself, what times what? Same number would be 16. My answer, 4. Next one. What number times itself equals 1? 1. Next question. What number times itself equals 400? My answer, 20. Square root of 10. What number times itself equals 10? The problem is, the only thing I can think of is 5 times 2. But that's not the same number, which means I cannot solve this question. There is no square root of 10, so there is none. Okay. Same thing. The square root of negative 16. I have to ask myself, what number times itself equals negative 16? Now you might be thinking 4 times 4. But 4 times 4 is 16. And that's not what I have here. I have a negative 16. Well, what if I was thinking negative 4 times negative 4? Well, what does 2 negatives equal? They actually equal a positive 16. I still can't get that number. So my answer to that, there is none. You can never have an answer to a negative square root. You cannot do it. Okay? I'd like you to pause the video and solve these 3 questions. Square root of 81, what number times itself would be 81? 9. Square root of 289, 17. Square root of 361, 19. You're also going to get numbers that are bigger than our list of 20. If we break these square roots down into 2 smaller numbers that are on your list, that will make these very easy. For example, I'm going to look at the square root of 2,500. I'm going to break it into 2 pieces. I'm going to break it into a number that's on our list, and then the 2 zeros. When I rewrite this, I'm going to break this into the square root of 25, and I'm going to break this into the square root of 100. And the reason I'm doing that is because 25 times 100 is 2,500, which is the number we're starting with. Okay? So what I need to do is break this down into 2 numbers that are on our list. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take the square root of 25, which is 5. And we're going to take the square root of 100, which is 10. And since I told you that we times these two numbers to get back to that number, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to times these two numbers. So 5 times 10 is 50. 50 is the square root of 2,500. Let's try that same strategy with the next question. 36 is in our chart. And I'm going to highlight the 2 zeros. I'm going to break this into two parts. We're going to break this into 36 square root times 100. And the reason I'm doing that is because, remember, 36 times 100 is, in fact, 3,600, which is what I have in my square root sign. So that's why I'm doing this. So the square root of 36 is just a 6 times the square root of 100 is 10. So 6 times 10 is 60. So the square root of 36 is 60. Last one. What is the square root of 14,400? I'm going to break this into 144s on our chart. And the 2 zeros. Wow, that's too dark. Same color. Okay, so what is the square root of 144? And I'm going to write this as times 100. Okay, now the square root of 144 is 12 times the square root of 100 is 10. If I multiply 12 times 10, 120. So my answer is 120. I'd like you to try these two problems. Okay, 9's on my list. 2 zeros. So I'm going to break this into square root of 9 times 100. The square root of 9 is 3 times. The square root of 100 is 10. So 3 times 10 is 30. So my answer is 30. Square root of 6,400, I recognize 64. I'm going to highlight the 2 zeros. I'm going to break this into 64 times 100. The square root of 64 is 8 times. The square root of 100 is 10, and 8 times 10 is 80. So my answer is 80. Part 3 is about area and finding a side length. The area of a square garden is 16 feet squared. We have to find the length of a side. Now remember, squares are special because all sides are equal. So in your notes, I would draw a square and I would like you to put 16 feet squared in the middle. Now remember, area means base times height. Also remember, on a square, the base and the height have to be the same number. So if the area is 16, I'm going to write that for A. I need to know what number times itself, because squares have equal sides, would equal 16. I can't say 2 times 8 because these numbers are not the same number. I need something else. I'm thinking 4 times 4. Is that the same number? Yes. So 4 times 4 is 16. So how long is a side? One side is 4 feet. I didn't put feet squared, I just said feet. Next question. This time I have an area of 1,600, and I'm supposed to find the side length. Okay? So because it says area, my formula is A equals base times height. Because it's a square and my sides are the same, I'm going to use the same letter. Okay? Now I told you my area is 1,600. That's my A, so I'm going to write it for my A. Equals base times base. So I got to ask myself, what times what equals 1,600? Now I don't have that on my list, so I'm going to break this down. I do have 16 on my list, and I'm going to highlight those zeros. So I'm going to try to figure out square root of 16 times the square root of 100. Well, the square root of 16 is 4 times the square root of 100 is 10. So 4 times 10 is 40. That means one side of the square is 40 meters. I'd like you to hit pause and try to answer this one. What is the length of one side if the area on a square is 8,100? Area is base times height. Remember, if I'm doing a square, I have to have the same sides. So I'm going to change that H to the same letter. My area, I'm going to write for A. So what times what is 81? Or 8,100? Well, I know 81, and I have 2 zeros. So square root of 81 times the square root of 100. The square root of 81 is 9 times the square root of 100, which is 10. 9 times 10 is 90. So my side is 90 feet. I want you to try this one. Area equals base times height because of my area, because it's a square. I'm going to change that H to a B. My answer is going to go for A. So what times what is 12,100? I recognize 121 right away. And then I'm going to highlight the zeros. So I'm thinking the square root of 121 times the square root of 100. The square root of 121 is 11 times the square root of 100 is 10, and 11 times 10 is 110. So my side length is 110 feet. This is the last part of the lesson. In your notes, I want you to write this down exactly how you see it. Find two consecutive whole numbers that the square root of 10 is between. What's important about this is the word consecutive. That means in a row. They have to be back to back, like 9 and 10, 1 and 2, or 88 and 89. Okay, they have to be in a row. Okay? Now, I already told you that there's no answer for this. 10 is not a perfect square. 10 is not on my list. Okay? 10 is not anywhere on here. Okay? So I'm trying to think about where is this number close to on our list. Number 10 would be right here. So that means the square root of 10 is close to the square root of 9 and the square root of 16. So I'm going to go back to that question and write that down. I have that number on my list, and I have the square root of 16 on my list. 10 is somewhere in between those two. So what we do is we answer the ones we know. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 16 is 4. Find two consecutive whole numbers that it's between. 3 and 4, they're consecutive whole numbers. They're in a row. So your answer is it's between 3 and 4. Let's try another one. Find two consecutive whole numbers that the square root of 296 is between. I'm going to write this one in my notes. Has to be 2 in a row for 296. I'm looking for the number 296 on my chart. So I'm going to go back and look at my chart. Looking for 296. 296. I'm over in the 200s. I'm over here. Looking for where 296 would be. Okay, here's 289. 324, so 296 would be somewhere in the middle of these two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my other page and write those two numbers, 289 and 324. I need to find the square root of both of those because 296 is in the middle, okay? So the square root of 289 is 17. The square root of 324 is 18. So when it says find two consecutive whole numbers that the square root of 296 is between, your answer is 17 and 18. I'm going to have you try this one. I'm going to go back to the chart and look for the square root of 31. I'm looking over in this column over here. 31 looks like it would go right here. So it falls between 25 and 36. So I'm going to go back to that page and write 25 and 36. 25 square root and 36. Because we said square root of 31 is between those two in our chart. So if I think about that, the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 36 is 6. So what two consecutive whole numbers is the square root of 31 between? It's between 5 and 6. Your homework for today is page 356 to 357. 2 through 46 evens, and 50 to 55 all, you cannot use a calculator. However, use your list. Your list will help you immensely. Good luck.